Hold the pup's hands down." Genevieve Sterling's voice carried the casual cruelty of someone who had never once feared consequences. She raised the jagged steak knife slowly, deliberately, over the trembling 10-year-old Omega boy, letting the anticipation do its own damage. Across the room, Silas Norton sat with a glass of red wine in his hand, watching, sipping, unmoved by the child's weeping. For 10 years, NORA had been the pack's invisible wound, a floor scrubber, a shadow, a thing that absorbed punishment without sound. She had learned the survival mathematics of silence. She had swallowed cruelty whole and asked for nothing. Then the blade began its descent toward the boy's fingers. And the thing she had buried, the thing she had been crushing down into the dark for a decade, finally broke free. "Stop!" One word, barely above a whisper, but it landed like a thunderclap soaked in ozone. Like the air pressure before a lightning strike compresses the world into a single, unbearable second. 50 elite warriors dropped to their knees before they understood why. Not from choice, from something older than choice. Before sunrise, the man who had kept her in chains would be forced to bow. But tonight, submission was still all she wore. To the human world, Black Ridge Timber Holdings was a success story, a booming logging empire carved out of the Oregon wilderness, its revenue streams clean on paper, its executive suite photographed for regional business journals. To the werewolves of the Pacific Northwest, it was something else entirely. It was the seat of Silas Norton, an alpha whose cruelty ran as deep as his fortune, and whose fortune ran very deep indeed. Within Silas's world, NORA existed somewhere below furniture. She was the grime beneath his expensive leather shoes, the thing no one looked at directly. She was 22 years old. Her hands looked 40. 10 years ago, her parents, Arthur and Madeline Hastings, had died in a border skirmish that no one bothered to fully explain. No living relatives came forward. Pack law was clear in such cases. The orphan became a ward of the alpha. What that meant in practice was something pack law declined to name plainly: indentured servitude. Because her wolf had never surfaced, and because she flinched from conflict the way most creatures flinch from fire, the pack physician had made it official. Dr. Harrison Gable had stood before Silas a decade ago, clipboard in hand, and delivered his verdict with the bored confidence of a man filling out paperwork. Quote, _2 he'd said. While Silas smiled. Her biology is stagnant, submissive to her core. Put her in the kitchens. That is the only place she will be of any use. So into the kitchens she went. Under Mrs. Beatrice Higgins, the Norton Estate's head cook, NORA learned to work commercial-grade bleach into tile grout until her knuckles split and bled. She learned to polish antique silver until her own exhausted face stared back at her from the curve of a spoon. Most critically, she learned the art of invisibility, how to occupy space without registering as a presence. Dr. Gable was wrong. NORA wasn't stagnant. She was a wildfire wearing a leash. She was kneeling in the grand hallway, driving the polishing rag hard against the oak floorboards when it came again. The heat. That familiar, agonizing pressure igniting behind her sternum like a coal pressed against the inside of her chest. Her eyes slammed shut. The rag fell. Phantom claws raked the inner walls of her ribcage, slow, deliberate, like something testing the bars of its enclosure. This was not the weak, trembling pulse of an omega spirit straining toward the surface. This was density, suffocation, blood running at 105 degrees without fever or illness to explain it. It was a beast throwing itself against iron, enraged and immense and violently aware. For years, she had catalogued these internal earthquakes as phantom pain, the grief of a broken girl mistaken for power. She had learned to swallow the fire, to drive the beast back down into the dark where it lived and press the lid tight above it. "Did I tell you to stop working, Mutt?" The voice cut through the hallway like a blade drawn cleanly from a sheath. NORA opened her eyes, dropped her chin. A pair of crimson-soled Christian Louboutin heels clicked into her sightline, measured, deliberate, the walk of a woman who expected flaws to be grateful for the contact.
Genevieve Sterling.
Silas's chosen mate. The future Luna of Blackridge Pack. A woman who wore her arrogance the way other women wore jewelry, always and with great intention. She was the daughter of a wealthy East Coast alpha, and she had arrived on the West Coast with the settled conviction that everyone here was beneath her. She reserved a particular, focused loathing for NORA. NORA said. Her voice came out smooth and emptied of everything. She retrieved the polishing rag from the floor. Quote 6, quote 7. Genevieve crouched just enough to flood NORA's senses. Heavy jasmine and ozone, an overwhelming wave of it, a scent designed to dominate. Silas is signing the new territorial treaty tonight. Alpha Blackwood is not going to walk into my home and find a pathetic, unwashed Omega loitering in the corridors. Her voice dropped to something sharper. You are a stain on this estate, NORA. If I had my way, you would have been banished to the rogue territories the day you turned 18. Yes, Miss Sterling. NORA scrubbed harder. Her hands were shaking, a fine, violent tremor she hid by pressing the rag down with both palms. The heat in her chest spiked again, hotter. The edges of her vision blurred and bled red, tinting the polished oak beneath her in colors it had no business wearing. Down, she told the thing inside her. The command was silent, internal, desperate. Stay down. We cannot survive out there. Genevieve scoffed and kicked the bucket over on purpose. Dirty, soapy water rushed across the freshly polished wood, soaking into the knees of NORA's faded servant uniform. __quote _13___. Her heels cracked against the corridor floor, each step a punctuation mark of contempt. NORA settled back on her heels. She stared at the spreading puddle. A sound rose from deep in her chest, low, guttural, vibrating through her teeth. Not a whimper, a growl. She slapped a wet, soapy hand over her mouth, heart slamming against her ribs. Omegas didn't growl. Omegas didn't feel the boiling compulsion to tear the throat from a superior wolf. NORA squeezed her eyes shut, breathing hard, forcing the heat downward. She buried it beneath 10 years of trauma and trained obedience. Then she grabbed the mop. Survival. That was the only word that mattered. She just had to endure until tonight's summit ended. But as she wiped away the water, something nagged at the edges of her mind, a sensation she couldn't dismiss. The cage, buried deep inside her consciousness, was rusting, and the lock was dangerously close to breaking apart. Headlights sliced through thick Pacific Northwest fog, catching the grand wrought iron gates of the Norton estate in twin beams of white. Inside the kitchen, chaos reigned. Mrs. Beatrice Higgins barked commands with a face flushed crimson, orchestrating the plating of roasted venison like a field general losing patience. NORA stood near the swinging doors, a tray of crystal water goblets balanced on her fingertips with surgical precision. The frantic energy swirling around her didn't touch her. She felt eerily still. That agonizing heat from the afternoon had retreated, not vanished, but transformed into a strange, thrumming hum just beneath her skin. It felt like the heavy electric silence before a massive thunderstorm splits the sky. They're taking their seats, Toby Richards whispered beside her. The 10-year-old Omega boy had been brought into the kitchens only recently, after his mother fell ill. His small hands trembled around a basket of warm artisan bread. Mrs. Higgins, Alpha Norton already looks angry. He wants the first course. Then move, move, move! Beatrice waved them forward. NORA, eyes on the table. Pour the water. Step back. Do not speak. Toby, follow her lead. If you drop a single crumb of that bread, I'll have your hide. NORA pressed through the heavy oak doors and stepped into the dining room. Crystal light cascaded from a massive chandelier overhead, illuminating the long mahogany table beneath it. At the head sat Silas Norton, broad shoulders straining against his tailored Armani suit, projecting an oppressive, domineering alpha aura, like a weapon aimed at every person in the room. Genevieve occupied the seat beside him, regal and self-satisfied, in a deep emerald gown. But Nora's attention didn't linger there. It pulled, almost magnetically, toward the opposite end of the table. Liam Blackwood sat at the far end, alpha of the neighbouring Silver Pines pack. Where Silas wielded his dominance like a bludgeon, Liam's power was something entirely different. A quiet, suffocating ocean, vast and still and impossible to gauge. He was lean, ruggedly handsome, dressed in a simple charcoal button-down that stood in stark contrast to Silas's corporate excess. His beater, Caleb Foster, occupied the chair to his right. Nora approached the table to pour water, and something shifted. The hum beneath her skin spiked sharply, vibrating in strange harmony with the air surrounding Liam. She kept her gaze fixed on the tablecloth, moving with practiced, silent grace. She reached his side, tilted the crystal pitcher. Ice-cold water filled his goblet. Liam stopped speaking mid-sentence. His head turned, just slightly. Sharp, storm-grey eyes locked onto Nora's wrist. His nostrils flared. Subtle, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. Nora froze for a fraction of a heartbeat. Every wolf she'd ever served had looked straight through her, their senses gliding past her muted, scentless presence without registering a thing. Liam wasn't looking through her. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't decode, shock layered over something deeper. Something fierce. "Is there a problem with the water, Alpha Blackwood?" Genevieve's voice sliced across the table, coated in artificial sweetness. Her eyes, though, drove into Nora like blades. __quote _19 _ Liam answered, smooth and unhurried. His gaze held on Nora 1 second longer than it should have, before drifting back to Silas. Quote 21, Silas said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied grin. Quote 22. Nora released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She pulled back fast, pressing herself into the shadows along the wall where servants were meant to stand and disappear. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Why had Liam stared at her that way? What had he detected on her skin? The dinner crawled forward at a punishing pace. Veiled threats passed as polite conversation. Corporate posturing dressed itself up as diplomacy. Nora watched everything from the wall, her gaze sweeping the room, and then it snagged on Toby. The young boy was approaching Genevieve's end of the table, gripping a silver gravy boat in both hands. His fingers trembled violently. Two powerful alphas, radiating their oppressive auras in one confined space. It was simply too much for his undeveloped omega senses. "Don't look at her, Toby," Nora begged in silence. "Pour it. Walk away." Toby reached Genevieve's side and lifted the heavy silver vessel. But the moment he began to tip it, Genevieve shifted suddenly in her chair, laughing at something Silas said. Her elbow caught Toby's wrist. The gravy boat slipped. A splash of scalding dark brown gravy struck the lap of Genevieve's custom emerald gown. Dead silence swallowed the dining room whole. Toby dropped the silver boat onto the carpet with a muffled thud. He crumpled to his knees instantly, both hands clamped over the back of his neck, the ultimate posture of wolf submission, weeping in raw, animal terror. Genevieve rose to her feet slowly, eyes locked on the dark stain spreading across her dress. Her face contorted into something beyond anger, pure, undiluted fury. Silas muttered, though disgust crawled openly across his own face. He turned to his guards. Quote 31, quote 32. Toby screamed, sobbing into the carpet. Quote 33, quote 34, quote 35. Genevieve hissed, one hand rising sharp. She stepped around the table and loomed over the trembling 10-year-old. Quote 36, quote 37, quote 38. Two massive pack enforcers moved forward, seizing Toby by the arms. They dragged him upright, forcing his small palms flat against the surface of the dining table. Genevieve picked up a heavy, serrated steak knife. 39, she said, voice cold as frozen iron. Liam Blackwood leaned forward in his chair, jaw tight. 40, Silas warned, amber flashing dangerous in his eyes. Genevieve raised the knife. Toby released a sound no child should ever make, pure, helpless agony. In the shadows, the rusty lock finally shattered. NORA didn't think. She didn't calculate. A decade of suppression, years of silent cruelty, the desperate, exhausting need to stay hidden. All of it evaporated in one blinding flash of white-hot fury. The beast inside tore through its cage. The scorta word wasn't shouted, it was barely spoken. But the instant that syllable left NORA's lips, it didn't merely carry sound, it carried physical, crushing weight. An explosion of pure, undiluted pheromones detonated outward from her body. Not the sweet, yielding scent of an omega. This was the scent of lightning splitting an ancient pine forest. Sharp, ozone-heavy, overwhelmingly dominant. The shockwaves struck the room like a detonation. Both massive enforcers holding Toby collapsed instantly. Their knees cracked against the floorboards as the sheer pressure of the command drove them into involuntary submission. They choked for air, unable to lift their heads. Genevieve dropped the knife. She stumbled backward, hands clawing at her own throat as though the air itself had turned solid. Even Silas, the proud, arrogant alpha of the Black Ridge pack, visibly flinched. His fingers gripped the arms of his chair so hard the wood splintered beneath them. Every head in the room snapped toward the shadows. NORA stepped forward into the chandelier's light. Her faded servant uniform looked obscene against the raw majesty of the power pouring off her skin. Her eyes, once dull, unremarkable brown, now burned a brilliant, terrifying, luminescent gold, the absolute, unmistakable mark of a true alpha bloodline. Liam Blackwood rose slowly from his chair, completely untouched by the crushing weight pressing everyone else to their knees. Profound awe spread across his face like dawn breaking. Silas choked out, fighting against the thick, heavy air. He stared at the servant girl he had tormented for 10 years. NORA planted herself between the shaking boy and the alphas. Those golden eyes, blazing, unholy, locked onto Silas like a predator sighting wounded prey. The masquerade was finished. Silence crushed the dining room flat. Not a breath, not a whisper. The crystal chandelier overhead seemed to lose its brilliance, outshone by the luminous gold pouring from NORA's gaze. 10 years she had haunted this estate like a ghost, a shadow stitched into the Norton wallpaper, noticed by no one, mourned by no one. Now every eye in the room belonged to her. Silas Norton broke the silence first. His amber eyes, always lit with that insufferable arrogance, had gone wide. Terror and furious denial wrestled across his face in equal measure. His fingers clamped around the mahogany table's edge. He hauled himself upright against the crushing, physical weight of NORA's aura. What trickery is this? The roar left his throat hollow, thin, stripped of its usual thunder, cracking under pressure he couldn't name. Liam Blackwood's voice cut through the tension like a blade dragged across stone. The Silver Pines Alpha rose from the table, each movement fluid, predatory, placing himself between NORA and Silas's recovering enforcers with calculated precision. His storm-grey eyes never once left her. Reverence burned there. Awe. Something deeper. Underscore, quote underscore, 52, underscore, quote underscore, 53, underscore. Genevieve Sterling scrambled backward, her emerald gown snagging on the leg of her overturned chair. She hit the floor with a graceless shriek, fingers clawing at her own throat. Underscore, quote, underscore, 5, 4, underscore. NORA didn't spare her a glance. The woman who had tormented her for a decade earned nothing. Not acknowledgement, not rage, nothing. Every shred of Nora's focus belonged to Silas alone. The inferno that had burned behind her ribs for years, caged, suffocating, relentless, was no longer a prison. It was an ocean of power flooding her bloodstream. Every instinct she had buried, every urge she had smothered, now roared through her with a single demand: dominate, protect the innocent, tear the false king from his stolen throne. Slowly, deliberately, Nora lowered her gaze to the boy at her feet. Toby had curled into a tight, trembling knot, but the instant Nora laid a calloused hand against his shoulder, the shaking stopped. Her power coiled around him like armor, warm, impenetrable, sealing him away from the crushing pressure that saturated the room. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 5, 5, underscore, underscore. Not a request. Her voice had changed. Gone was the raspy, timid whisper of a servant girl. In its place, something melodic, resonant, a subsonic frequency threaded through each syllable that commanded absolute obedience without a whisper of cruelty. Toby lifted his tear-streaked face into the golden light of her eyes. He scrambled upright and pressed himself behind her faded cotton skirt. Silas bared his teeth. His canines punched downward, elongating as the wolf beneath his skin clawed toward the surface. 56. 57. The two enforcers still lay gasping against the floorboards. They hesitated. Biology screamed at them louder than any alpha's command. To strike a true alpha, a mythical bloodline tracing back to the original forest kings, was to court biological annihilation. But fear of Silas won. It always did. They growled low, dragging themselves off the oak planks. They never made it a single step. Caleb Foster materialized from the shadows beside the doorframe. 2 strikes, brutal, surgical, absolute. Both enforcers exploded through a glass display cabinet. Antique porcelain detonated across the room in a shower of shattered heirlooms. Silver Pines will not stand idle while a true alpha is assaulted, Norton. Liam's warning carried the weight of a death sentence. His own aura erupted at last. Cold, savage, a winter storm ripping through the room, merging seamlessly with Nora's heavy ozone scent. The combination was staggering, a harmonious collision of power that made the very bones of the Norton estate groan beneath their feet. "She belongs to Blackridge," Silas snarled, ripping his suit jacket away. Dark fur erupted along his forearms as muscles swelled and twisted beneath the skin. Her father was weak, and she is weak. She is my property. Arthur Hastings was never weak. Liam's voice dripped with quiet venom, each word carved from ice. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 64, underscore, underscore. You siphoned millions to bribe pack elders and hire the rogue mercenaries who ambushed Arthur and Madeline. You stole this territory, Silas. We are leaving. Toby comes with me. If anyone follows, I will not show this much mercy again. We go now to Silver Pines. You should be resting. I rested for 10 years. Quote 70 quote. I won't sleep until Silas is handled. Liam crossed the distance and offered her a mug. Their fingers brushed. A violent jolt of electricity cracked between them. Sharp, undeniable. Nora's breath caught, her gaze locked onto his storm-grey eyes. The pull was magnetic. Ancient. The unbreakable thread of fated mates drawn impossibly taut. You feel it too? Liam's voice dropped to a whisper. I knew the exact moment you poured that water. My wolf recognized his other half. But you are completely free here, Nora. I will never push you, not after a lifetime of stolen choices. Hot tears of relief blurred her vision. Silas won't let this go. My existence alone makes his claim to the Black Ridge Pack illegitimate. Caleb's scouts detected heavy movement along the border. Silas isn't waiting for the Council of Elders. He's mobilizing his elite enforcers, planning to wipe Silver Pines off the map and bury the truth with it. Nora's fingers tightened around the mug until her knuckles went bone white. Silas was prepared to ignite a full-scale pack war, slaughter innocent wolves, all to protect a throne built on murder. The fiery beast coiled in her chest, dormant for days, snapped awake with a vengeful roar. "He won't spill one more drop of innocent blood because of me. This ends tonight. Liam Blackwood, surrender the Hastings girl now, and I'll let your pathetic pack live." Liam did not step forward. A single figure emerged from the deep shadows instead. Nora walked into the pale wash of moonlight, unarmed, unhurried. Wind tore through her dark hair. Her golden eyes burned like twin suns against the pitch-black wall of forest behind her. "You want me, Silas?" Her voice rolled through the canyon, magnified by something ancient stirring inside her, the power of the rightful true heir. "Kill her!" Silas shrieked, jabbing a trembling finger in her direction. Not one enforcer moved. Nora's aura detonated outward, a suffocating hurricane of pure alpha dominance that swallowed the clearing whole. Every Black Ridge enforcer dropped where they stood, knees buckled, spines folded. Primal instinct crushed them flat beneath the overwhelming scent of their ancestral ruler. "You stole my family." Nora stepped forward. "Poisoned my mind." Another step. "Corrupted a proud pack." Silas saw his men were useless. A strangled howl ripped from his throat as he shifted. His hulking, dark brown wolf launched forward, jaws snapping, fangs aimed squarely at her exposed throat. Nora didn't flinch. As he closed the distance, she leapt. The transformation was instantaneous. Mid-air, the fragile human woman vanished. In her place descended a colossal wolf, impossibly massive. Fur a pristine midnight black that swallowed the moonlight whole, golden eyes blazing with ethereal fury. The true alpha had finally awakened. Silas slammed into her full force. It was like a stray dog hurling itself against a mountain. Nora didn't shift an inch. A snarl tore from her chest, deep, terrible, and she sank razor teeth into his scruff. Not to kill, to dominate. She hoisted the false alpha clean off the muddy ground and drove him into the earth with shattering force. Ancient trees shuddered from the impact. He thrashed wildly beneath her, useless. She pinned him with one massive paw planted square on his heaving chest. Then she leaned close, glowing golden eyes inches from his terrified amber ones, and unleashed a roar that rattled the teeth of every wolf within 10 miles. The ultimate demand, absolute submission. Under the crushing weight, physical and divine, the sacred pressure of her bloodline, Silas Norton's broken spirit snapped clean through. His wolf whimpered, tail tucked tight. He bared his throat in unconditional, pathetic surrender. A collective gasp swept the clearing. Every single Black Ridge enforcer bowed low to the black wolf. From the opposite tree line, Liam, Caleb, and the entire Silver Pines pack emerged and dropped to their knees in stunned reverence. Nora released Silas slowly, shifted back to human form with fluid grace. Liam was at her side in an instant, wrapping a heavy coat around her trembling shoulders. She sagged against his broad chest, steadied by the rhythm of his heartbeat. "It's done," she whispered. Those brilliant golden eyes dimmed gently, fading back to warm, quiet brown. The false king's reign was finished. The silent Omega servant had reclaimed her stolen crown, not with borrowed strength, but with the undeniable power of her own blood. Two packs, united under fated mates, would finally know a new dawn. Nora had spent 10 agonizing years in the dust, but tonight she owned the stars. If this story left you breathless, hit that like button. Share it with anyone who lives for werewolf drama. And subscribe for more stories like this one. Drop a comment below. Your support brings these wild adventures to life. Until next time.